pause right here, and we're going to take some questions from our lovely audience.
My question is, you were just talking about the risks of use of marijuana, and I know what I've learned over the years is that marijuana was considered a gateway drug. Tell me a little bit more about how you feel about that fact or that statement.
Right. In the past, I believe this was in 1947, the New York State's governor actually had a scientific research regarding marijuana being a gateway drug. And that research came back saying that marijuana did not increase any potential to abuse heroin or cocaine. So there's actually documented literature to prove that marijuana is not a gateway drug. So all that, it's a misinformation and misconception. Studies have actually proved that.
So it's just the opposite is what you're saying. It's not a
It's not a gateway drug, and there are scientific studies to prove that.
Okay.
Taking that just a little bit further, I'm under the impression, and have read some reports, in Israel and other places where they're using this and have been for many more years than we have in the United States, but they're actually using it as an exit drug to get people off of harder drugs. Do you, can you speak to that at all?
Like I just mentioned earlier, we had the scientific research done in New York over 40 years ago, and the research showed that it's not a gateway drug. I can illustrate this by saying that if you smoke marijuana and the THC that we talked about earlier gives you a certain level of high, when you smoke it again, that level of high keeps decreasing. And you know, when they did this research, they actually had patients try out the cocaine. And then in that process, they found out that it wasn't the marijuana that made them smoke cocaine, or if they weren't smoking cocaine, they would smoke marijuana. And like I said earlier, the potential for abuse for marijuana is 9%, while the potential for abuse for cocaine is 20%, while that for heroin is 25%, and tobacco 30%, and alcohol about 30% too. So there's less tendency to abuse marijuana. So that's why the research proved and showed that it was not a gateway drug for patients who were taking heroin or cocaine.
So do we have any other questions? Okay.
Okay, I've been told that marijuana is actually used like as a stress reliever. Can you tell me more about that?
The stress relief part, I would say it would have to do with the receptors in the brain, because it has the cannabinoid receptors in the moods, the mood center in the brain. And so if you smoke marijuana, it can actually help you ease of stress. But at the same time, there has also been study to show that if there are withdrawal symptoms, which will lead to some physical effects such as insomnia and anxiety. So that's when you have the 9% tendency to want to continue to use it.
Right, and doesn't it induce the hormone dopamine, which is one of the feel-good hormones in the brain. So that's probably one of the reasons why it relaxes you and it makes you feel good, because of the hormones that are released as you're smoking. So what we're going to do is we're going to move on into legalization. So statistically, 1 out of every 6 people in federal prison are now in prison because of a marijuana offense. Do you think that decriminalizing marijuana will have a positive or negative impact on society?
I believe decriminalizing marijuana will have an extremely positive effect on the society. And the reason being that a lot of times people are imprisoned because they're found in possession of marijuana, maybe up to 1 ounce. And if you look at states that have now legalized marijuana, they are not only saving money from putting people in prison, they're also making money from it, like you said earlier in the show, with a 30% state tax. And that's bringing in a lot of income. So I would advocate for decriminalizing marijuana and also for medicinal use of marijuana.
Yeah, because marijuana is potentially a multi-billion-dollar industry. And you know, if they're taxing it, they at 30%, that could bring a boom to the economy. That's, yeah, that's a lot of extra money.
Right.
I'm sorry, do we have any other questions from the audience?
Other than arthritis, autism, and Alzheimer's, are there any other benefits from?
Yeah, a lot of benefits. The seizure we talked about, patients with epilepsy, they benefit so much from the use of marijuana. And like we said, the CBD is the one that has the component of the cannabis that has a whole lot of medicinal effects. But studies have also shown that if you have some components of the CBD with a little bit of the THC, you get a whole positive effect to whatever condition you're treating. They also use it for patients who have HIV and AIDS because of the nausea and vomiting and the weight loss. And so that would help with the appetite receptors in the brain and stimulate the appetite, and then they can eat and gain weight. That has also been used for that. And we have already talked about the glaucoma use. Yeah, and now research is ongoing so much with the use for treatment of cancer and also for diabetes.
Right, and for cancer patients too that are undergoing chemotherapy and radiation.
Right.
A lot of times that's one of the only ways that they have an appetite with the marijuana.
And also to help with the vomiting because it helps with the receptors in the brain.
Right.
And also another big part of the use of marijuana would be for chronic pain. A lot of patients who suffer neuropathic pain don't get relief with a lot of medicines that we treat them with, such as hydrocodone, Xanax. Right. And then we see that they have made marijuana a Schedule I drug, which means it is a very dangerous drug and has no medicinal use. So these are laws that need to change because this law was put into place in 1970. That's over 45 years ago. And they made cocaine, heroin, hydrocodone, Schedule II drugs, meaning that they're less potential for abuse. And studies have proven this wrong. And so these are things we're advocating for, that we need to change these laws and make marijuana, useful for medicinal purposes.
That was really good.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, one more question.
What are the long-term effects of using marijuana?
Like I said, so far all the researches that we have and all the studies and all the scientific literature that we have seen have not shown us any long-term side effects. The more we're looking at is more with the medicinal advantages. In the very past, a lot of times we were all misinformed because all the studies they had in the very past were studies of use of marijuana causing you cancer. There were no studies to show us the medicinal effects. So now the studies we're getting more are studies that are looking at the benefits of the use of marijuana to treat a lot of medical conditions.
So basically what you're saying is the side effects are actually positive side effects.
More side effects, and the only side effects that we have seen are more with the withdrawal symptoms, which are mainly physical, such as insomnia and anxiety.
Okay.
Which conditions do you see and treat the most in your practice in terms of how you're using it in the community?
For marijuana, it's not legal in the state of Georgia. No, I mean, it's still not legal in the state of Georgia, so we're not prescribing it yet. So I only have license to practice in the state of Georgia. So, and it's against the federal law to go across state borders and do that, So I don't have a license in Colorado, so I can't prescribe it. But I see a lot of chronic pain patients.
If you could, which conditions do you see routinely that you would use it?
Right, the chronic pain patients. chronic pain has been a huge topic in medicine in the United States. A lot of patients die from overdose of hydrocodone. They die from overdose of Xanax. And these are considered Schedule 3 and Schedule 4 drugs under the Drug Enforcement Agency, and meaning that they're less dangerous. And marijuana is high up there as very dangerous, the most dangerous, and no beneficial medicinal benefits. So we see a lot of chronic pain patients, patients who have actually been to maybe to the war, and now there's studies to show that it's used for post-traumatic stress disorder. And so these patients who have neuropathic pain suffer very severe pain. And a whole lot of them who have used marijuana will tell you that they get a lot of relief, as opposed to using hydrocodone, Percocet, that they can overdose on and have an accidental death.
And of course, they're not using it here in Georgia because it's illegal.
Right.
This is hypothetically speaking. Okay, we'll take another question.
I know how adults can use it, they can smoke it, but for children, like you said, it could be used for autism. How would they administer it to children? Because we're not going to advocate children smoking.
Right.
So it's like pill form, is it in a liquid form that they can drink?
Well,
right.
I mean,
Okay. You know.
Interesting
Okay.
you say
Yeah.
that, because one of the things that I've heard about people doing for their children when it comes to autism is they put it in foods, like in brownies and just baking, and because when you put it in food, you don't have the same. You don't get the, obviously the long-term, the smoking effects of it, but you still get the medicinal uses of it because you still get the THC.
No, you get the CBD
the
more.
CBD, yeah,
right.
the
And
CBD.
basically, there's actually a drug made from marijuana that's in the market called Marinol. It's actually a prescription drug, and that's been in the market for some years, and that they can use. But the thing, like you just said, is you don't get enough medicinal value from it as opposed to inhaling it or smoking it, because it's been synthesized. And then for the children, the ones they're using more as the oil form, and like you said, you can put in cereal and all that, but it's concentrated, very highly concentrated in CBD, which has the highest benefits for seizures and pain and autism and all the medical conditions that we have talked about. And a lot of times they can combine it with the THC.
So, when we're talking about the medicinal properties of marijuana, but also the economic impact that marijuana has, because recently 13 states have allowed the use of medical marijuana, and this is according to the Huffington Post. They said that at the state and local government level, they spent $10 billion in an unsuccessful attempt to regulate marijuana, while California, who legalized marijuana, raked in $1 million in profits from the tax revenue. So do you think that legalizing marijuana would help boost the Georgia economy?
Definitely, definitely. I mean, you already told us that in a day, the very first day they sold, recreational marijuana, they made over $1 million. So the taxes, the state tax, will help boost the economy, and I think we should all advocate for it, especially for people who need it for medical conditions.
Right. So I mean, and I think what it all boils down to is, should the government regulate personal behavior? The people on the advocates say governments, government shouldn't try to regulate personal behavior because it's a personal choice that you're making that's only going to affect you. And then on the other hand, it becomes a moral issue for people saying that they don't want to set this type of example for their children, and they don't want to make it they don't want the children to think that this is something that's safe or something that's acceptable. What do you think about the moral versus the economic side of it?
I believe the government should have some regulations with that, because just like how we have regulations with alcohol, we have regulations with tobacco. I think marijuana, if it becomes legalized, should also have regulations. And also, I would not advocate the use of marijuana before the age of 21, like I told you, unless it's really needed for medicinal uses. But if it's recreational, I would not advocate for that. I would recommend that the kids, grow to be at least 21 and have knowledge of what they're getting into, and also because the brain would already be all fully grown and matured at the time. And so legalizing marijuana in the state of Georgia and also accompanying that with regulations will be the best way to go, because that way we can keep the doctors, the prescribers, the pharmacies, the farmers who grow the marijuana all in check.
Right. Yeah, and the sad part about it is if someone gets convicted 3 times of marijuana possession, they could get life in prison for marijuana. I mean, this is not this is a non-violent offense.
Yeah.
And whereas rapists and murderers, a lot of times they're out in 20 to 30 years. That's where's the justice in that?
I know, and that's why we're advocating for the decriminalization of marijuana and changing a lot of policies regarding marijuana and the laws. And even now, the federal government has just passed a law where banks can now, take money from marijuana traders, even for the recreational use.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that's new. That was new like 2 weeks ago. So a lot of changes are going on in the legal system regarding the use of marijuana.
Okay, so we're going to pause right here and we're going to take a short break. And when we come back, we're going to talk more about sickness and disease and maintaining wellness. So if you're sick and you want to get well and you want to stay well, then don't touch that dial, because Step by Step will be right back after the break.